The sound of weeping carried across the prairie like a wounded animal's cry, and Owen Garrett reined in his horse so sharply that dust billowed around them both. He had been riding for 3 days straight, herding cattle from the southern pastures back to his ranch outside Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and every bone in his body ached for rest. But something about those sobs made his chest tighten, made him forget about his own exhaustion as he urged his mount toward the abandoned wagon sitting crooked on the trail ahead. It was September of 1882, and the late afternoon sun painted the grasslands in shades of amber and gold. The wagon's canvas cover flapped in the wind, torn in places, and one of the wheels sat at an odd angle. As Owen drew closer, he could make out a woman's figure collapsed against the wagon's side, her shoulders shaking with the force of her grief. She wore a simple calico dress covered in trail dust, and her dark hair had come loose from its pins to hang in tangles around her face. Owen dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Madam," he called out, keeping his voice gentle despite the concern knotting in his gut. "Are you hurt?" The woman's head snapped up, and even with her face streaked with tears and dirt, Owen felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, wide with fear and exhaustion. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24, he guessed, and she looked like she had been through hell itself. "Please," she gasped, her voice raw from crying. "Please just leave me be. There's nothing left to take." Owen held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not looking to take anything, madam. I'm just trying to help. What happened here?" she laughed, but it was a bitter sound that made Owen's jaw tighten. "What happened? Everything. Everything happened." She gestured weakly at the wagon. "My husband died of fever 2 days back. I buried him myself 5 miles down the trail. The wheel broke yesterday, and I've been trying to fix it, but I don't have the strength. The oxen wandered off during the night, probably scared by wolves, and I'm out here alone with no food, no water left, and no idea what to do next." Owen's heart clenched at the devastation in her voice. He had seen plenty of hardship in his 30 years, had lived through his own share of loss, but there was something about this woman's despair that cut him to the bone. He took a step closer, then another, until he was standing just a few feet away. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She wiped at her face with the back of her hand, smearing the dust. Delilah Rivers. My husband was Thomas. We were heading to Wyoming, trying to start fresh after we lost our farm in Iowa to the bank. I'm Owen Garrett. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here, just outside Scottsbluff." He looked at the broken wagon, at the meager possessions he could see through the open back, and made a decision that felt as natural as breathing. "Climb up. You're coming home with me." Delilah stared at him like he had spoken in a foreign tongue. "What? No, I couldn't possibly." "You don't even know me. I'm a complete stranger." "You're a woman in need, and I'm not about to leave you out here to die," Owen said firmly. He walked to his horse and began untying his bedroll from behind the saddle. "We can come back for your wagon and belongings with a proper team. Right now, we need to get you somewhere safe before dark. There are wolves in these parts, like you said, and worse things than wolves." "I have no money to pay you," Delilah said, her voice breaking again. "I have nothing to offer." Owen met her eyes, and something in his gaze must have convinced her of his sincerity. "I'm not asking for payment. I'm offering help, plain and simple. Now, can you ride, or do you need me to lead you?" Delilah stood on shaking legs, and Owen saw how thin she had become, how the dress hung loose on her frame. He wondered how long it had been since she had eaten a proper meal. Without thinking, he closed the distance between them and offered his arm for support. She hesitated for just a moment before taking it, and Owen felt the tremor in her fingers. "I can ride," she said quietly. I grew up on a farm, but your horse looks tired already. Red's stronger than he looks, and it's not far. We'll take it slow." Owen helped her mount, making sure she was secure before swinging up behind her. Delilah stiffened at the closeness, but exhaustion must have won out because she soon sagged against him, her head resting just below his chin. They rode in silence for the first few miles, with only the sound of hoofbeats and the wind rustling through the grass. Owen kept one arm steady around Delilah's waist to keep her from sliding off, and he tried not to notice how perfectly she fit against him, or how her hair smelled faintly of lavender despite everything she had been through. "Why are you helping me?" Delilah asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nobody helps strangers for nothing. What do you want from me?" Owen was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. "My mother died when I was 12, he finally said. "Cholera outbreak that swept through our town. My father remarried a year later, but his new wife didn't want a half-grown son around. He gave me a choice: go work for wages on someone else's ranch or strike out on my own. I was 13 years old and alone in the world." He felt Delilah turn slightly, trying to see his face. "What did you do?" "I worked. Did whatever jobs I could find. Mucked stables, mended fences, helped drive cattle. Saved every penny for 15 years until I had enough to buy my own land. Built my ranch from nothing, and I did it all alone." His voice softened. "But there were people who helped me along the way. A rancher who let me sleep in his barn when I had nowhere else to go. A woman who fed me when I was so hungry I could barely stand. A man who taught me how to break horses when I was desperate for work. I wouldn't be here today without their kindness, and I swore to myself that if I ever had the means, I would help others the same way." Delilah was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry about your mother and your father. It was a long time ago." Owen shifted in the saddle, guiding Red around a rocky outcropping. "What about you? Any family back in Iowa?" "No." The word was heavy with old grief. "My parents died in a house fire when I was 18. Thomas was a neighbor's son, and we married a few months later. We tried to make the farm work, but there were droughts and bad harvests, and the debt just kept piling up. We thought Wyoming might give us a chance to start over, but now—" Her voice cracked. "Now Thomas is dead, and I'm completely alone." "You're not alone," Owen said, surprising himself with the fierce certainty in his voice. "Not anymore." They crested a hill as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, and Owen's ranch spread out before them in the valley below. It wasn't much to look at compared to some of the bigger operations, but Owen was proud of what he had built. The main house was solid timber with a covered porch. The barn was well maintained, and there were several corrals for the horses and cattle. Smoke rose from the chimney of a smaller cabin set back from the main house. "That's where my foreman lives," Owen explained, nodding toward the cabin. "Jake Martinez. Good man, been with me for 5 years. His wife Rosa helps with the cooking and cleaning. They have a daughter, but she's married and living in town now." As they rode into the yard, a wiry man with gray, streaked dark hair emerged from the barn, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Owen. The smile faded to concern when he spotted Delilah. "Boss, you're back early." "Who's this?" Owen dismounted and helped Delilah down, noting how she swayed on her feet. "Jake, this is Delilah Rivers. Found her stranded on the trail with a broken wagon. She needs food, rest, and a safe place to stay. Can you let Rosa know we have a guest?" Jake's expression softened immediately. "Of course. Rosa just put supper on. I'll go tell her to set another place." He hurried toward the smaller cabin, calling his wife's name. Owen guided Delilah toward the main house, one hand at the small of her back in case her legs gave out. "There's a spare bedroom upstairs. It's not fancy, but the bed's comfortable and the sheets are clean." Rosa changes them regular, even though nobody's used that room in years. Why? Delilah asked, and Owen heard the exhaustion dragging at her words. I kept hoping I'd have reason to need it someday. Family visiting, maybe, or... He trailed off, not wanting to say what he had really hoped for. A wife, children, a house full of life instead of just him rattling around in empty rooms. Inside, the house was neat but sparse, furnished with handmade furniture and a few store-bought pieces. Owen led Delilah upstairs to a small bedroom that looked out over the prairie. Someone, probably Rosa, had put wildflowers in a vase on the dresser, and the quilt on the bed was pieced together in a star pattern. There's water in the pitcher for washing, Owen said, suddenly feeling awkward. I'll have Rosa bring up some hot water if you'd like a bath after supper. And we'll find you some clean clothes. Rosa's about your size, I think. Delilah sank onto the edge of the bed like her strings had been cut. I don't know how to thank you. I still can't believe this is real. It's real. Owen backed toward the door, giving her space. Rest for a bit. I'll come get you when supper's ready. Downstairs, Rosa had already started fussing, pulling out extra plates and filling a basin with warm water. She was a round, motherly woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. When Owen explained the situation, her face crumpled with sympathy. That poor girl, losing her husband like that, out on the trail with nobody to help. It's a miracle you found her, Owen. She handed him the basin and a clean cloth. Take this up to her. Tell her supper will be ready in 20 minutes and that I'm heating water for a bath. Owen did as he was told, tapping lightly on the bedroom door. Delilah opened it, and he saw that she had tried to tidy her hair and wipe some of the dust from her face. He handed her the basin and cloth. Rosa says supper in 20 minutes, and she's heating bath water for you. Please thank her for me. Delilah took the basin with both hands, and Owen noticed the cuts and calluses on her palms. She had been telling the truth about trying to fix that wagon wheel herself. Owen, why do you live alone? A man with a ranch like this, I would have thought you'd be married. The question caught him off guard. Never found the right woman, I suppose. Been too busy building this place up. What about you and Thomas? Were you happy? Delilah looked down at the water in the basin. We were comfortable, safe. Thomas was a good man, steady and hardworking, but happy. She met Owen's eyes, and he saw a flash of something that might have been guilt. I don't think either of us married for love. We married because we were both alone and scared, and it seemed like the practical thing to do. Owen didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and left her to wash up. Downstairs, he helped Rosa set the table while Jake came in from tending to Red. They made small talk about the cattle drive, about the ranch business, but Owen's mind kept drifting upstairs to the woman with honey-colored eyes who had cried alone by a broken wagon. When Delilah came down for supper, she had washed her face and hands and attempted to braid her hair, though pieces still escaped to frame her face. She looked young and vulnerable and beautiful, and Owen had to remind himself that her husband had been dead less than 3 days. Whatever he was feeling, it was far too soon. Rosa had outdone herself with the meal: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh bread, and green beans from her garden. Delilah's eyes widened at the sight of so much food, and Owen realized she probably hadn't eaten properly in days, maybe weeks. Please sit, Rosa urged, pulling out a chair. Eat as much as you want. There's plenty. They sat around the table, and Jake said a simple grace before they began passing dishes. Delilah took small portions at first, as if afraid to seem greedy, but Rosa kept piling more food on her plate with motherly insistence. Owen noticed how Delilah ate slowly, carefully, like someone who had gone hungry and now feared making herself sick by eating too fast. Owen tells us you were heading to Wyoming, Jake said, his tone conversational. Got family there? Delilah shook her head. No family anywhere. Thomas had heard there was cheap land for homesteading. We thought we could start a farm, maybe raise cattle. He had experience with both. It's hard country out there, Jake said. Beautiful but hard. Not many women would have the courage to bury their husband and try to keep going alone. I didn't have much choice, Delilah said quietly. What was I supposed to do? Lay down and die beside him. Rosa reached over and patted her hand. You're safe now. You can stay here as long as you need to get your strength back and figure out what you want to do next. After supper, Rosa showed Delilah to the bathing room off the kitchen, where a copper tub had been filled with hot water. Owen heard the door close and tried not to think about Delilah sinking into that water, washing away the dust and grief of the trail. Instead, he helped Jake check on the horses and make sure everything was secured for the night. She's pretty, Jake observed as they walked toward the barn. And she's been through hell. You be careful, Owen. Woman like that in her situation, she might see you as a savior rather than a man. I know, Owen said, though the warning stung a little. I'm just helping her out, that's all. Jake gave him a look that said he didn't quite believe that, but he let it drop. They checked the horses, made sure the barn was locked up tight, and then Jake headed back to his cabin while Owen returned to the house. Rosa was in the kitchen, cleaning up the last of the dishes. She's still in the bath, Rosa said. I left her some of my clothes to wear, and I'm going to wash her dress and mend it tomorrow. Poor thing, she's so thin. I could count her ribs when I helped her with the buttons. Owen felt anger flare in his chest at the thought of Delilah suffering like that. We'll make sure she eats well while she's here, build her strength back up. You're a good man, Owen Garrett. Rosa dried her hands on her apron and headed for the door, but be careful with your heart. She's grieving, and grief does strange things to people. After Rosa left, Owen sat in the front room trying to read a week-old newspaper by lamplight. But the words blurred together, and his ears kept straining for the sound of Delilah moving around upstairs. Eventually, he heard her footsteps on the stairs, and he looked up to see her standing in the doorway wearing one of Rosa's simple cotton nightgowns with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was damp and hanging loose down her back, and without all the trail dust, she looked even younger than he had thought. I wanted to thank you again, she said softly. For everything. The meal, the bath, the bed. I know I said it before, but I truly mean it. You saved my life today. Owen set the newspaper aside. You don't need to keep thanking me. Anyone would have done the same. No. Delilah moved into the room, perching on the edge of the chair opposite him. Not everyone. I've seen plenty of people turn their backs on others in need. You chose kindness when you didn't have to, and that means something. They sat in silence for a moment, the lamplight casting shadows on the walls. Owen could hear the wind picking up outside, rattling the windows slightly. What will you do? He asked. After you've rested and recovered, I mean. Will you still try to go to Wyoming? Delilah looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. I don't know. It was Thomas's dream, not really mine. I just went along because I was his wife, and that's what wives do. But now, she shrugged helplessly, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I have no money, no family, no skills beyond basic farm work and keeping house. You could stay here, Owen heard himself say before he could think better of it. Not permanently, I don't mean to suggest anything improper, but you could stay until you figure things out. Rosa could use help with the cooking and cleaning, and I'd pay you fair wages. It would give you time to decide what you want to do next. Delilah's head snapped up, her eyes searching his face. You would do that. Let me stay and work for you, if you want to. No pressure, but the offer's there. She was quiet for so long that Owen thought she might refuse. Then she nodded slowly. All right, thank you. I'll stay for a while, at least until I can figure out my next move. They talked a bit more, carefully avoiding anything too personal or painful before Delilah excused herself to bed. Owen sat alone in the front room for a long time after she left, staring at the dying fire in the hearth and wondering what he had just gotten himself into. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Delilah woke early and helped Rosa with breakfast, then spent her days helping with laundry, mending, cooking, and all the other endless tasks that came with running a household. Owen watched her slowly come back to life, the color returning to her cheeks as she ate regular meals, the shadows under her eyes fading with good sleep. She was quiet much of the time, clearly still grieving, but he caught glimpses of the woman she must have been before tragedy struck. She had a quick wit and a pretty laugh, though she seemed surprised when either emerged. Owen and Jake took the wagon out to retrieve Delilah's belongings, fixing the broken wheel and bringing everything back to the ranch. There wasn't much. Some clothes, cooking pots, a few books, a tin box containing letters, and a daguerreotype of a stern-looking man Owen assumed was Thomas Rivers. Delilah went through everything carefully, and Owen gave her privacy to decide what to keep and what to let go. He found her in the barn one afternoon about a week after she had arrived. She was standing next to one of the stalls, stroking the nose of a sweet-tempered mare named Daisy. Tears were streaming silently down her face. "Delilah," Owen approached carefully. "What's wrong?" She wiped at her face quickly. "Nothing, I'm fine. I was just thinking about Thomas. He loved horses. He would have liked it here." Owen leaned against the stall door, watching her. "Tell me about him." "There's not much to tell." Delilah continued petting the horse, not meeting Owen's eyes. "He was 28 when we married. Quiet, serious, practical. He never raised his voice or his hand to me. He worked hard. He wanted children someday, though we weren't blessed with any." She paused, her hand stilling on the horse's neck. "He was a good man, and he deserved better than dying of fever on a trail in the middle of nowhere." "Yes, he did." Owen moved closer, close enough to see the fresh tears welling in her eyes. "It's all right to grieve him. It's all right to be angry at how unfair it is." "I should have done more," Delilah whispered. "I should have gotten him to a doctor sooner. I should have—" "Stop." Owen surprised himself by reaching out and taking her hand. "You did everything you could. Sometimes people die and it's not anyone's fault. It's just what happens." Delilah looked down at their joined hands, and Owen realized he should probably let go. But he didn't, and she didn't pull away. They stood like that for a long moment, with the quiet sounds of the barn around them and Daisy's warm breath on their arms. "I feel guilty," Delilah admitted quietly. "I should be sadder. I should be devastated. But mostly I just feel relieved, and that makes me a terrible person." "Why relieved?" She finally met his eyes. "Because I didn't love him. Not the way a wife should love her husband. I cared for him, I respected him, but I didn't love him. And now I'm free, and I feel guilty for being glad about that, even though I'm also sad he's dead." Her face crumpled. "What kind of woman feels that way?" "An honest one," Owen said gently. He squeezed her hand and then, reluctantly, let it go. "You're not a terrible person for having complicated feelings. You're just human." Delilah wiped her face again and straightened her shoulders. "I should get back to the house. Rosa is teaching me how to make her biscuit recipe, and I don't want to be late." As the weeks passed, Owen found himself looking for excuses to be near Delilah. He came in for lunch when he normally would have eaten in the fields. He lingered over breakfast instead of gulping down his coffee and running out the door. He found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, stories about his childhood and his years of struggle, his dreams for the ranch's future. Delilah, in turn, began to open up. She told him about growing up on the farm in Iowa, about her mother's flower garden and her father's booming laugh. She told him about the night of the fire, how she had been visiting a friend and came home to find her entire world reduced to ash. She told him about the loneliness of her marriage to Thomas, how they had shared a bed and a life but never really shared themselves. "I used to dream about being in love," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their habit to spend this time together, the hour between supper and full dark when the world seemed to hold its breath. Really in love, the way they write about in books, someone who made my heart race and my palms sweat, someone I couldn't stop thinking about. But I married Thomas instead because I was scared and alone, and I thought maybe love didn't really exist anyway. Maybe it was just something people made up. Owen's mouth was dry. "Do you still think that?" Delilah turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that made Owen's heart pound. "No, I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong." The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Owen wanted to close the distance between them, to take her hand again or maybe even kiss her. But he held back. It had only been a month since Thomas died. It was too soon. She was grieving and vulnerable, and he would not take advantage of that, no matter how much he wanted her. "I should go to bed," Delilah said softly, though she made no move to stand. "Early start tomorrow. Rosa wants to teach me how to make preserves." "Delilah." Owen said her name like a prayer. "I need you to know something. Whatever you decide to do, wherever you decide to go, you'll always have a place here. Not because I expect anything from you, but because you've become important to me. Because I care about what happens to you." She smiled, and it was the first real smile he had seen from her, the kind that reached her eyes and lit up her whole face. "I care about what happens to you too, Owen Garrett, more than I probably should." October gave way to November, and the weather turned colder. Delilah had been at the ranch for 2 months, and she no longer looked like the broken woman Owen had found weeping by her wagon. She had gained weight, her skin glowed with health, and she moved with confidence around the ranch. She had become indispensable to the household, and even Jake admitted he didn't know how they had managed without her. But there was still a wall between her and Owen, an invisible line neither of them dared to cross. They spent their evenings together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cold, talking about everything and nothing. Their hands would brush sometimes, sending sparks through Owen's whole body. He would catch her watching him with an expression he didn't dare interpret, and then she would look away quickly, as if afraid of what he might see. One morning in late November, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was a well-dressed man in his 40s, riding a fine horse and carrying himself with the air of someone important. Owen met him in the yard, instantly wary. "Can I help you?" The man dismounted and extended his hand. "Name's Charles Whitmore. I'm a lawyer from Omaha. I'm looking for a woman named Delilah Rivers. I was told she might be here." Owen's blood ran cold. "What do you want with her?" "I have some news regarding her late husband's estate. Is she here?" Owen called for Delilah, and she emerged from the house with flour dusting her apron, clearly in the middle of baking. Her face went pale when she saw the lawyer. Whitmore removed his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Rivers, I'm sorry to intrude. I've been trying to track you down for several weeks." "It's about your late husband." "What about him?" Delilah's voice was steady, but Owen could see her hands trembling. "It seems Mr. Rivers had a life insurance policy that no one knew about. He took it out shortly before you left Iowa, and I've been trying to locate you to inform you that you're the beneficiary. The payout is $1,500. Delilah swayed, and Owen quickly moved to her side, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. $1,500. That can't be right. We didn't have any money for insurance." Apparently, he sold some equipment and livestock without telling you and used the money to purchase the policy. He wanted to make sure you would be provided for if anything happened to him. Whitmore pulled some papers from his saddlebag. I need you to sign some documents and then I can arrange for the money to be transferred to a bank of your choosing. Delilah looked up at Owen, her eyes wide with shock. $1,500. That's more money than I've ever seen in my life. It's enough to start over, Owen said quietly, even though the words felt like stones in his mouth. Enough to go wherever you want, do whatever you want. The lawyer stayed for about an hour, getting Delilah's signature on various documents and explaining her options. When he finally left, Delilah stood in the yard, staring at the papers in her hands as if they might disappear if she blinked. I can't believe Thomas did that, she said softly. He must have sold almost everything we had to afford that policy, and he never told me. He loved you, Owen said, trying to ignore the ache in his chest. He wanted you to be safe. Delilah looked up at him, and there were tears on her cheeks. Owen, I need to tell you something. I need to be honest with you about how I feel. You don't have to say anything. Owen stepped back, giving her space even though it hurt. I know what this means. You have money now. You can go to Wyoming like you and Thomas planned. You can start fresh somewhere new. You don't have to stay here and work for wages just to survive. Is that what you think I want? Delilah's voice rose slightly. To leave, to go to Wyoming and try to build some dream that was never mine to begin with. I don't know what you want. You've never said. I want to stay. The words burst from her like they had been locked inside too long. I want to stay here with you. I've wanted it for weeks now, but I was too afraid to say anything because I thought maybe I was just confused or grateful or not thinking straight. But I'm not confused. I know exactly what I want. Owen's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Delilah, you've only been widowed for 2 months. People will talk. They'll say you didn't love Thomas, that you're shameless, that I took advantage of you. Let them talk. Delilah closed the distance between them, reaching up to cup his face with one flour-dusted hand. I don't care what anyone says. I know the truth. I know that Thomas was a good man who deserved more than I could give him. I know that I tried to be a good wife even though my heart was never fully in it. And I know that what I feel for you is nothing like what I felt for him. When I'm with you, my heart races. When I think about you, I smile. When I imagine my future, you're in it. That's not grief or gratitude or confusion. That's love, Owen. I love you. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close as something that had been wound tight in his chest finally loosened. I love you too. I've loved you since the day I found you crying by that wagon. I've loved you through every conversation, every smile, every moment we've spent together. But I didn't want to rush you. I didn't want to be the man who took advantage of a widow's vulnerability. You could never do that. Delilah pulled back just enough to look at his face. You're the kindest, most honorable man I've ever met. You gave me safety when I had nothing. You gave me hope when I thought I had none left. You gave me time to heal and space to figure out what I really wanted. And what I want is you. Owen lowered his head and kissed her, finally crossing that invisible line they had been dancing around for months. Delilah's arms went around his neck, and she kissed him back with a passion that made his knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not as someone who works here and not because you don't have anywhere else to go. Stay because you want to build a life here, with me. Yes, Delilah said, and her smile was brighter than the Nebraska sun. Yes to all of it. They stood in the yard, holding each other while the autumn wind swirled around them, and Owen thought about all the years he had spent alone, building this ranch and wondering if he would ever have someone to share it with. He thought about the loneliness that had been his constant companion and how completely Delilah had filled all those empty spaces in his life. Rosa came out of the house, took one look at them, and burst into tears of joy. "Finally! I've been waiting for you two stubborn fools to figure it out. Jake owes me $5. Over the next few weeks, Owen and Delilah had to navigate the complicated process of figuring out how to be together in a way that respected both Thomas's memory and the conventions of their time. They agreed to wait until a proper mourning period had passed before getting married, though it nearly killed Owen to sleep under the same roof as the woman he loved and not be able to make her his wife. But they were together, and that was enough for now. They continued their evening talks on the porch, but now Delilah sat close enough that Owen could put his arm around her. They held hands while walking around the property, making plans for the future. Delilah told him she wanted to use some of Thomas's insurance money to buy chickens and start a proper egg business. She wanted to plant a garden in the spring, like her mother used to have. She wanted to learn to ride better so she could help with the cattle. "I want to be your partner," she told him one cold December evening as they sat bundled together on the porch. "Not just your wife, but your true partner in building this ranch into something amazing." "You already are my partner," Owen said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You have been since the day you got here." Christmas came, and Owen gave Delilah a beautiful leather-bound journal for her to write in. She gave him a scarf she had knitted herself, learning how from Rosa, working on it in secret for weeks. They spent the holiday with Jake and Rosa, eating too much and laughing, and for the first time in years, Owen felt like he had a real family. As winter settled in hard, with snow piling up and the wind howling across the prairie, Owen and Delilah's relationship continued to deepen. They learned each other's rhythms and quirks, discovered shared interests and enjoyable differences. Delilah had a passion for reading that Owen had never developed, but he loved listening to her read aloud by the fire in the evenings. Owen could spend hours working with the horses, and Delilah learned to appreciate the patient skill it took to gentle a wild Mustang. "Tell me about your father," Delilah asked one night as they sat by the fire. "You said he chose his new wife over you, but you never talk about how that made you feel." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "I was angry for years. Felt like he had betrayed me, chosen a woman he barely knew over his own son. But as I got older, I started to understand. He was lonely after my mother died, and his new wife made it clear it was her or me. He chose the companionship over the responsibility. It wasn't right, but I understand it now in a way I couldn't when I was 13. Have you seen him since then?" "No, he died about 5 years ago. His wife wrote to tell me, asked if I wanted to come to the funeral. I didn't go." Owen stared into the flames. "Maybe I should have, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Too much hurt there, even after all that time." Delilah took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I wish I could go back in time and tell that 13-year-old boy that everything would turn out all right, that he would build something wonderful and find someone to share it with. He wouldn't have believed you," Owen said with a small smile. "But I'm glad you're here to tell me now." As the weeks passed, they began to make more concrete plans. They decided to marry in the spring in April, which would give them a full 6 months from Thomas's death. It still might raise some eyebrows in town, but it seemed like a reasonable compromise between what society expected and what their hearts demanded. Delilah used part of Thomas's insurance money to order a simple wedding dress from a seamstress in Scottsbluff, and she spent her free time sewing linens and quilts for their future together. Owen worked with a carpenter to build new furniture for the bedroom they would share, wanting everything to be perfect for Delilah. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when Delilah would grow quiet and distant, lost in memories or grief. There were nights when she would cry for the life she had lost, for the husband who had died loving her even though she couldn't love him the same way back. Owen learned to recognize these moments and give her the space she needed to work through them, while also being there to hold her when she needed comfort. One particularly hard day came in late January, when they received a letter from Thomas's brother in Iowa. He had heard about Thomas's death and was angry that Delilah hadn't written to inform the family. The letter was harsh, accusing Delilah of being a cold-hearted woman who had probably contributed to Thomas's death through neglect. It suggested she had already moved on with improper haste, as if grief had a statute of limitations that she had violated. Owen found Delilah in the barn, the letter crumpled in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "He's right," she sobbed. "I am cold-hearted. I should have written to them. I should have told them what happened." "You were barely surviving yourself," Owen said firmly, taking the letter from her and tossing it aside. "You buried your husband alone on the prairie, tried to fix a broken wagon by yourself, and nearly died of starvation and exposure. You didn't have the luxury of thinking about distant relatives who never bothered to help you when you were losing your farm to the bank. But they were his family. They deserved to know. And now they do know. You can write them back if you want, explain what happened. But you don't owe them your grief or your guilt. You did the best you could in an impossible situation." Owen pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Thomas's brother doesn't know you. He doesn't know what kind of wife you were or how hard you tried. He's just lashing out because he's hurting, and you're an easy target." Delilah clung to him, her tears soaking into his shirt. "What if people in town think the same thing? What if everyone believes I'm just some heartless woman who couldn't wait to replace her husband? Then they don't know you either, and their opinion doesn't matter." Owen pulled back to cup her face in his hands, making her look at him. "The people who matter, the people who know you, they see the truth. Rosa and Jake love you. They know you're a good person. And I know you better than anyone, and I know exactly what kind of woman you are. You're strong and brave and kind and honest. You're someone who tried to make the best of a difficult marriage, who honored her vows even when her heart wasn't in it. And you're someone who deserves to be happy now, even if some people can't understand that." Delilah nodded slowly, wiping at her tears. "I want to write to Thomas's family. I want to explain what happened, apologize for not writing sooner. But I'm not going to apologize for moving on with my life. I'm not going to pretend I'm still drowning in grief when I've found happiness again." "Good." Owen kissed her forehead. "Write your letter, say what you need to say, and then let it go. You can't control what other people think or feel. You can only control your own actions, and you haven't done anything wrong." February brought a terrible blizzard that trapped them inside for 3 days straight. The wind howled so loudly it was hard to think, and the snow piled up so high against the house that they had to dig their way out to the barn to feed the animals. Owen insisted on making the trek himself, not wanting Delilah to risk getting lost in the white-out conditions. Each time he came back inside, covered in snow and half frozen, Delilah would wrap him in blankets and make him drink hot coffee until he stopped shivering. "You scared me," she admitted the second day, after he had been gone for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. "I kept imagining you getting lost, freezing to death out there, and me never finding you." "I'm not going anywhere," Owen promised, pulling her into his lap as they sat by the fire. "It takes more than a little snow to get rid of me. This is not a little snow, this is practically a wall of snow." "All right, a wall of snow. Point stands. I'm not leaving you, Delilah, not for a blizzard, not for anything." Being trapped inside together for 3 days was both wonderful and torturous. They played cards, read to each other, talked until they ran out of things to say, and then talked some more. But they were also acutely aware of being alone in the house, of sharing space with an intimacy that made Owen's blood run hot despite the cold outside. He would catch Delilah looking at him with hunger in her eyes, and he knew she could see the same desire in his. They kissed more during those 3 days than they had in all the weeks before, desperate kisses that left them both breathing hard and aching for more. But they held back, maintaining the boundary they had set for themselves. They would wait until after the wedding. It was only 2 more months. By the time the blizzard finally cleared and Jake and Rosa dug their way over from their cabin to make sure everyone was all right, Owen and Delilah were wound so tight with wanting each other that Rosa took one look at them and laughed. 2 more months, she said knowingly. You can make it 2 more months. I'm not sure I can, Delilah muttered, and Owen had to agree. But they did make it, through February and into March, as winter slowly loosened its grip on the prairie. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green with spring. The days grew longer and warmer, and Owen and Delilah's wedding day drew closer with each sunrise. They decided to have a simple ceremony at the ranch, with just Jake, Rosa, and a few friends from town. Owen arranged for a circuit preacher to come out and perform the service, and Delilah spent weeks preparing food for the small celebration they would have afterward. The night before the wedding, Delilah asked Owen to take a walk with her. They wandered away from the house, out onto the prairie where wildflowers were just beginning to bloom. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I never thanked you properly," Delilah said as they stood watching the sunset, "for saving my life that day, for giving me hope when I had none, for loving me even when I probably didn't deserve it." "You deserve everything good in this world," Owen said fiercely. "And you're the one who saved me, if we're being honest. I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions of building a ranch and a life but never really living. You gave me purpose. You gave me joy. You gave me a reason to believe in love." Delilah turned to face him, the dying light making her eyes glow like honey. "Tomorrow, when that preacher asks if I take you as my husband, it's going to be the easiest yes I've ever said. Because I'm not marrying you out of fear or loneliness or practicality. I'm marrying you because I love you with everything I am, and I can't imagine my life without you." Owen kissed her then, long and deep and sweet, and thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, he had been alone, riding back from a cattle drive with no idea that his entire world was about to change. He had heard a woman weeping by her wagon and made a choice to help her, never imagining that choice would lead him here, to this moment, to this love. "I love you, Delilah Rivers," he whispered against her lips. "Tomorrow you'll be Delilah Garrett, and every day after that, I'm going to do everything I can to make you happy." "You already make me happy," she said, "just by being you." They stood together as darkness fell, holding each other and dreaming about their future, about the life they would build together on this land they both loved. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, one of those perfect April days that felt like a gift from heaven. Delilah dressed in her new gown, simple white muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs, and wore wildflowers in her hair that Rosa had gathered that morning. She looked like something from a dream, and when Owen saw her walking toward him across the yard, he felt his throat get tight with emotion. The ceremony was short and sweet, the preacher's words simple but meaningful. When it came time for the vows, Owen's voice was steady and sure as he promised to love and cherish Delilah for the rest of his life. Delilah's voice trembled slightly as she made the same promises, but her eyes never left his, and the love shining in them made Owen's chest feel too small to contain his heart. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said with a smile. "You may kiss your bride." Owen kissed Delilah in front of their small group of friends and family, and it felt like sealing a sacred promise, like declaring to the world that they belonged to each other now. When they broke apart, everyone cheered, and Rosa was crying happy tears again. They celebrated with a feast Rosa and Delilah had prepared: roasted beef, potatoes, fresh bread, pies, and a cake that had taken Delilah 2 days to make. They danced to music from a fiddler Owen had hired from town, laughing and spinning under the open sky. Owen danced with his new wife, holding her close and thinking about how this felt like the beginning of everything. As the sun set and their guests began to leave, Owen and Delilah stood together on the porch, watching the last rays of light fade from the sky. The house was quiet now, just the two of them, and Owen could feel Delilah trembling slightly against his side. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," she admitted, "but also excited, happy, so incredibly happy." Owen took her hand and led her inside, up the stairs to the bedroom he had spent months preparing for this night. Rosa had left a lamp burning low, and there were fresh flowers on the dresser. The bed looked inviting with its new quilts and soft pillows. Owen closed the door behind them and turned to his wife. "We don't have to rush anything. We have all the time in the world." Delilah stepped close to him, reaching up to cup his face. "I've been waiting for this for months. I've been waiting for you. I don't want to wait anymore." They came together with a passion that had been building since that very first day, when Owen had found Delilah crying by her wagon and felt something shift in his chest. They learned each other's bodies with gentle hands and whispered words, discovering pleasure and intimacy that neither of them had known before. This wasn't just coupling or duty. This was love, pure and complete, and it transformed them both. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. Delilah traced patterns on Owen's chest with her fingertips, and he played with her hair, unable to stop touching her now that he finally could. "That was nothing like being with Thomas," Delilah said quietly. "I didn't know it could be like that. I didn't know it could feel like that." "Neither did I," Owen admitted. "I've been with women before, but it was never like this. It was never this intense, this meaningful." "I love you so much," Delilah said, and Owen could hear tears in her voice. "Sometimes it scares me how much I love you. What if something happens? What if I lose you too? You won't lose me." Owen pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'm healthy and strong, and I'm careful. I'm going to grow old with you, Delilah. We're going to have a long, happy life together. Promise me." "I promise. I'm not going anywhere." They made love again, slower this time, savoring every touch and kiss, every whispered word of love. And when they finally fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Owen thought that this was what happiness felt like. This was what he had been searching for all those lonely years. The first year of their marriage was everything Owen had hoped for and more. Delilah threw herself into life on the ranch with enthusiasm and creativity. She started her chicken business, selling eggs in town and making a tidy profit. She planted a massive garden that provided vegetables for their table and extras to sell or trade. She learned to ride well enough to help Owen move cattle, and she had a natural gift for spotting when an animal was sick or injured. But more than all the practical help she provided, Delilah brought joy to the ranch. She sang while she worked, laughed easily, and had a way of making even hard days seem bearable. Jake and Rosa adored her, and the ranch hands Owen hired for spring roundup all remarked on how lucky he was to have found such a woman. They still had their evening time together on the porch, though now they often spent it talking about their day or making plans for the future. Delilah wanted to expand the chicken operation. Owen wanted to buy more land to the west. They talked about children, about how many they wanted and what they would name them. "I want at least 3, Delilah said one evening as they watched the sunset. "I hated being an only child. I want our children to have siblings to play with and depend on." "3 sounds good," Owen agreed, imagining the house full of children's laughter. "Though I reserve the right to be terrified when you actually get pregnant." "Why terrified?" "Because childbirth is dangerous. Women die. I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you." Delilah turned to look at him, her expression serious. "I'm strong and I'll have the best doctor in the county attending me. I'll be fine. You have to trust that." "I'll try," Owen said, though the fear was already there, lurking at the edges of his happiness. But fear couldn't stop life from happening. And in August, Delilah came to him with tears in her eyes and a smile on her face to tell him she was expecting their first child. Owen felt joy and terror in equal measure, but the joy won out when he swept her into his arms and spun her around while she laughed. "A baby," he kept saying, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We're going to have a baby. In March, the doctor thinks, right around our first anniversary." They spent the next months preparing, turning one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery. Rosa helped Delilah sew baby clothes and blankets. Jake built a beautiful wooden cradle that would rock when you pushed it gently. Owen found himself lying awake at night with his hand on Delilah's growing belly, feeling their child move and kick, and marveling at the miracle of it all. Delilah handled pregnancy well, though she got tired easily and had to stop helping with the heavier ranch work. She spent more time in the house, cooking and sewing and reading, while Owen tried not to hover too much. It was hard, though, when every protective instinct he had was screaming at him to wrap her in cotton wool and never let anything bad happen to her. "You need to relax," Rosa told him one day when she caught him following Delilah around like a worried sheepdog. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. She's going to be fine. But what if she's not? Then you'll deal with it when it happens." But spending all your time worrying isn't going to help anyone, especially not Delilah. She needs you to be strong and confident, not nervous and scared. Owen knew Rosa was right, so he tried to rein in his anxiety. He focused on making sure the ranch was running smoothly, that they had enough money saved in case anything went wrong, that the doctor knew he would be paid handsomely to drop everything and come the moment Delilah went into labor. Winter came again, not as harsh as the year before, but still cold and snowy. Delilah grew larger and more uncomfortable, and Owen did everything he could to make her comfortable. He carried her up the stairs when she was too tired to climb them herself. He rubbed her swollen feet and her aching back. He held her when she cried from hormones and fear and the overwhelming reality of what was about to happen. "What if I'm a terrible mother?" she asked one night as they lay in bed. "What if I don't know what to do?" "You're going to be an amazing mother," Owen said firmly. "You're kind and patient and loving. Our child is lucky to have you. I want to be good at this. I want to give our baby everything I didn't have. Safety, security, 2 parents who love each other. I want them to grow up knowing they're wanted and cherished." "They will," Owen promised. "We'll make sure of it together." Delilah went into labor on a cold March morning, about a week before their first anniversary. Owen was in the barn when Rosa came running, her face pale with urgency. "It's time. Get the doctor." Owen rode to town faster than he had ever ridden in his life, returning with the doctor in less than an hour. Then began the longest day of Owen's life, pacing downstairs while Delilah labored upstairs with Rosa and the doctor attending her. He could hear her cries of pain, and each one felt like a knife to his heart. Jake tried to distract him with work and conversation, but nothing could take Owen's mind off what was happening above him. Hours passed, the sun moving across the sky as Delilah fought to bring their child into the world. Owen wore a path in the floor with his pacing, prayed more than he had prayed in years, and made bargains with God that he knew were probably futile. Just let her be all right. Let them both be all right. I'll do anything, give up anything, just please let them survive this. Finally, as afternoon was fading toward evening, he heard a new sound, the sharp, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Owen froze, his heart in his throat, waiting for what felt like an eternity until Rosa appeared at the top of the stairs with a huge smile on her face. "It's a boy," she announced. "A big, healthy boy. And Delilah is tired but fine. You can come up now." Owen took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Delilah propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the most beautiful thing Owen had ever seen, his son. "Owen," Delilah said softly, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. "Come meet your son." Owen approached slowly, almost afraid this was a dream that would disappear if he moved too fast. He sat on the edge of the bed, and Delilah shifted the bundle into his arms. Owen looked down at the tiny face, the little fists, the perfect features, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This was his son, his child, a person he and Delilah had created together out of love. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, unable to look away. "Absolutely perfect." "I thought we could name him Oliver," Delilah said. "Oliver Thomas Garrett, after you and after Thomas, because even though things were complicated between us, Thomas was still a good man and he deserves to be remembered." Owen looked at his wife, this incredible woman who had come into his life broken and lost and had become his everything. She was generous enough to honor her first husband while building a new life with her second, strong enough to endure hours of labor and then think about names and the future. "Oliver Thomas Garrett," he repeated, testing it out. "I love it. It's perfect." They sat together, the three of them, as the sun set outside and their new family began. Owen had never felt so full, so complete, so grateful to be alive. He thought about that day almost a year and a half ago when he had heard a woman crying by her wagon and made the choice to help her. That one decision had changed everything, had given him this life, this love, this beautiful child. The next few months were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Oliver was a good baby, healthy and strong, but he still needed constant care. Delilah nursed him and rocked him, and somehow managed to keep the household running despite getting very little sleep. Owen helped whenever he could, walking the floor with Oliver at night so Delilah could rest, changing diapers and learning how to soothe his son's cries. They celebrated their first anniversary quietly, with just the two of them and Oliver after everyone else had gone to bed. Owen gave Delilah a locket with a tiny portrait of Oliver inside, and she gave him a new saddle she had been working on in secret for months. They toasted each other with cider and talked about how much had changed in just 1 year. "Sometimes I think about that day," Delilah said softly, Oliver asleep in her arms. "The day you found me, I was so lost, so certain my life was over. I had no idea that I was actually about to begin living for the first time." "I think about it too," Owen admitted. "I think about how easily I could have ridden past. I was tired and sore and just wanted to get home. But something made me stop, made me investigate. I like to think it was fate, that you and I were always meant to find each other." "Maybe we were," Delilah said with a smile. "Maybe Thomas and I were never meant to make it to Wyoming. Maybe the whole point was to get me to that spot on the trail at exactly the right moment for you to find me." "I found you, but you saved me," Owen said. "You gave me a reason to believe in love, in family, in a future that's about more than just work and survival. You gave me everything, Delilah." We gave each other everything, she corrected gently. That's how love works. It's not one person saving another. It's two people choosing each other every single day and building something beautiful together. Life continued to unfold with all its joys and challenges. Oliver grew from a baby into a toddler, learning to walk and talk and get into everything. Delilah got pregnant again when Oliver was 2, and this time the labor was easier, faster, and produced a beautiful daughter they named Olivia Rose. 2 years after that came another son, Oscar James, rounding out their family at 3 children. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Owen expanded the land holdings and increased the herd. Delilah's chicken and egg business grew so successful that she hired a girl from town to help her manage it. They built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Jake and Rosa became like family, doting on the children like they were their own grandchildren. They celebrated holidays together, weathered hard times together, and built memories that would last a lifetime. There were hard times, of course. A drought one year that killed half the herd and nearly bankrupted them. A winter so harsh that they lost several cattle to the cold. The time Oliver broke his arm falling out of a tree, and Owen nearly fainted from the sight of the bone sticking through the skin. The time Olivia got scarlet fever and they thought they might lose her, spending nights taking turns holding her while she burned with fever. But they weathered all of it together, Owen and Delilah, their love deepening with each challenge they overcame. They still had their evening time on the porch, though now it was often interrupted by children who needed something or wanted to sit with them and watch the sunset too. They still talked about everything and nothing, still held hands, still looked at each other with the same love and desire they had felt in those early days. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Delilah on a ride out to the spot where he had first found her. Someone had cleared away the rocks and debris from the old trail, and wildflowers now grew thick where her broken wagon had once sat. They stood together, holding hands, looking at the place where their story had begun. 10 years, Delilah said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and also like a lifetime ago. Best 10 years of my life, Owen said. Well, except for that time you made me eat your first attempt at Rosa's biscuit recipe. Delilah laughed and swatted his arm. Those biscuits were not that bad. They were like eating rocks and you know it. Fine, they were terrible, but I got better. You got amazing. Owen pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. You're amazing at everything, Delilah. You're an incredible mother, a wonderful wife, a brilliant businesswoman, and the love of my life. You're pretty amazing yourself, Cowboy. Delilah turned in his arms to look up at him. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for helping a stranger in need. Thank you for giving me a home and a family and a life beyond anything I could have imagined. Thank you for climbing up on that horse, Owen said. Thank you for taking a chance on me, for loving me, for building this life with me. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God for you every single day. They kissed there on that spot where their lives had intersected, where fate or chance or divine intervention had brought them together. And then they rode back to the ranch, back to their children and their home and the life they had built together out of nothing but love and hope and hard work. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and growth. Oliver grew into a tall, serious young man who loved working with the cattle and dreamed of expanding the ranch even further someday. Olivia was spirited and independent, showing an interest in horses that rivaled Owen's own. Oscar was the gentle one, the peacemaker, with his mother's kind heart and his father's steady nature. Owen and Delilah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines, but their love never wavering. They were best friends and lovers, partners in every sense of the word. They knew each other's thoughts and finished each other's sentences. They could communicate with just a look across a crowded room. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting everyone from town and all the neighboring ranches. There was dancing and food and speeches about what a wonderful couple Owen and Delilah were, how they were an example of what true love looked like. Owen stood with his arm around his wife, surrounded by their children and grandchildren because, yes, Oliver had married and given them their first grandchild, and he thought about how impossible this all would have seemed 20 years ago. "What are you thinking?" Delilah asked softly, leaning into him. "I'm thinking about how one decision changed everything," Owen said. "I'm thinking about how hearing you cry by that wagon led to all of this. You, our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this community. I'm thinking about how grateful I am that I stopped that day." "I'm grateful you stopped too," Delilah said, tears shining in her eyes. "You gave me a second chance at life, Owen. You gave me love when I didn't think I'd ever find it. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Owen corrected, echoing her words from so many years ago. "That's how love works." They danced together that night, swaying to music under the stars, surrounded by everyone they loved. And Owen thought that this was what happily ever after looked like. Not a fairy tale ending where everything was perfect, but a real life ending where two people chose each other every day through good times and bad, building something beautiful together one moment at a time. As they grew even older, Owen and Delilah began to slow down. They handed more of the ranch operations over to Oliver, though Owen still went out to check on the cattle, and Delilah still ran her now famous egg business with help from Olivia. They spent more time with their grandchildren, passing down stories and wisdom, teaching them about hard work and love and the importance of helping others. On warm summer evenings, you could still find them on the porch, sitting close together and watching the sunset. Their bodies were older now, joints stiff with age, but their hands still fit together perfectly, and their love was as strong as ever. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked one evening as they sat watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Staying here, marrying me, building this life. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you had gone to Wyoming like you and Thomas planned?" Delilah looked at him like he had grown a second head. "Regret it?" "Owen Garrett, marrying you and building this life with you has been the greatest privilege of my existence. I don't wonder about what might have been because what we have right here, is more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me love, gave me a family, gave me a home. You gave me the life I was always meant to have." "I feel the same way," Owen said, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Delilah, then, now, and always." They sat together as darkness fell, holding hands and dreaming about the future their children and grandchildren would build. They talked about the ranch expanding further, about new generations carrying on what they had started. They talked about growing old together, about all the sunsets they still had left to watch. Years later, when they were both well into their 70s, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Owen and Delilah would tell their story to anyone who wanted to hear it. They would talk about that day on the trail, about how sometimes the worst moments of your life can lead to the best things, about how love can find you when you least expect it. "I was lost and broken," Delilah would say, her hand always finding Owen's. "And this man stopped to help a stranger in need. He said, 'Climb up, you're coming home with me,' and I did, and it changed everything. She saved my life just as much as I saved hers," Owen would add. "Maybe more." She taught me what love really is, what family means, what it is to build a life with someone you cherish. Their children would roll their eyes fondly at hearing the story for the 100th time, but their grandchildren never tired of it. They loved hearing about the broken wagon, the desperate situation, the choice to help that led to a lifetime of love. On a warm spring day when Owen was 78 and Delilah was 76, they took one last ride out to the spot where it had all began. It was harder now, their bodies protesting the journey, but they were determined. They stood together on that ground, now thoroughly overgrown with wildflowers and tall grass, and looked at each other with all the love of 5 decades together. "Thank you," Owen said simply, "for saying yes, for staying, for loving me, for giving me the best life a man could ask for." "Thank you for stopping," Delilah replied, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Thank you for seeing someone who needed help and choosing kindness. Thank you for every day, every moment, every memory we've built together." They kissed there one more time in the place where their story had begun, and then rode back home together. Home to the ranch they had built, the family they had raised, the life they had created out of nothing but love and determination, and a single act of compassion on a dusty trail in Nebraska. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Delilah holding his hand. She followed him just 6 months later, as if she couldn't bear to be apart from him for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple, but inscribed with words their children had chosen. Together always. Their children continued to run the ranch, passing it down through generations, and the story of Owen and Delilah became family legend. The story of how a cowboy heard a woman weeping by her wagon and made a choice that would echo through the years. The story of how he said, "Climb up, you're coming home with me," and she trusted him enough to do it. The story of how 2 broken people found each other and built something beautiful together, something that would last long after they were gone. Because that's what true love does. It doesn't just change 2 people. It ripples out, touching everyone around them, creating a legacy that lasts for generations. And every time someone in the Garrett family stopped to help a stranger in need, every time they chose kindness over convenience, every time they opened their home and their hearts to someone who was lost and hurting, they were honoring Owen and Delilah's legacy. The ranch still stands today, run by the 5th generation of Garretts, and if you visit on a warm summer evening, you might hear the echo of laughter from the porch, the sound of 2 people who loved each other talking softly as they watched the sunset together. Because love like Owen and Delilah's never really dies. It lives on in the land they tended, the family they raised, and the countless lives they touched through their example of compassion, courage, and unwavering devotion. This is their story. The story of a woman who lost everything and a man who had everything to give. The story of a broken wagon on a prairie trail and a choice that changed 2 lives forever. The story of how sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best things, if you're brave enough to take the hand that's offered and trust that maybe, just maybe, there's something better waiting ahead. Owen found Delilah when she needed saving, but in the end, they saved each other. And together, they built not just a ranch or a family, but a love story for the ages, one that would be told and retold around dinner tables and on porch swings for generations to come. A story that proved that sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one person who sees someone in pain and decides to help. One person who says, "Climb up, you're coming home with me." One person who chooses love over convenience, compassion over callousness, and opens their heart to the possibility that a stranger might become the most important person in their life. That was Owen and Delilah's gift to the world. The proof that love can bloom even in the hardest soil, that second chances do exist, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. They lived their truth every single day, showing everyone around them what it meant to truly love another person, to build a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection, to weather every storm together and come out stronger on the other side. Their great-great-grandchildren still live on the ranch, still tend the land, still tell the story. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right across the prairie, you can almost hear it. The sound of a woman weeping by a broken wagon and a man's kind voice saying, "Climb up, you're coming home with me." The sound of a love story beginning, of two souls finding each other against all odds, of a future being born from the ashes of the past. This is how legends are made, not from grand gestures or epic adventures, but from simple acts of kindness that ripple out through time. From one person seeing another's pain and choosing to help. From love that starts as compassion and grows into something that will outlast both people who created it. Owen and Delilah Garrett lived and loved and built something that mattered. And their story continues to inspire, generation after generation, reminding us all that sometimes the best things in life come when we're brave enough to accept help, to trust a stranger, to climb up and go home with someone who sees our worth even when we can't see it ourselves. And they all lived, as the saying goes, happily ever after. Because happy endings aren't about perfection. They're about finding the person who makes your life better, who stands beside you through everything, who loves you on your worst days and celebrates you on your best. They're about building something real and lasting and true. That's what Owen and Delilah had. That's what they gave to the world, and that's why their story will never be forgotten.